Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get in to this week's show. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, and happy Sex on the Peach day. I'm your host, Peach, and today's episode is a very difficult but very necessary one. We're going to be discussing the ways in which different kinds of trauma can affect our relationship with all things sexual. Obviously, trauma, recovery, and healing look completely different for absolutely everyone. So I don't want this episode to feel like a how-to on how to deal with those traumatic experiences, because everyone needs to find the right way for them. But we'll be looking at the ways trauma can affect your sex life and what that might look like. I'll be speaking on my own personal experiences of trauma and its after effects. And I'll just be suggesting some guidance on how to think about starting to move forward from it, because that's often the hardest part. I'll also be discussing some of the experiences you've sent in to me and answering some of your questions. I will add now that this episode comes with trigger warnings of abuse, rape, and sexual violence. So please take that into consideration before listening and only proceed if you feel comfortable. I'm actually bookending this episode with quotes that I've always held closely when it comes to this subject. And this first one, which is written by Jonathan Munsey Storm, I felt very deeply during my own recovery. You must understand where she's been and what she's endured. She has spent years in survival mode, and that is trauma to the soul. Sometimes you have to learn all over again that the silence is peace and not a prelude to war. Given the very sensitive topic, I won't be giving this episode a humorous or pun-filled title. Today is simply named Sex After Trauma. Okay, here we go. Sex is, or should be, one of the greatest experiences of intimacy and connection, and an opportunity for us to have the freedom to explore all the ways in which we can give and receive pleasure. But unfortunately, that is often simply not the reality. There are sadly countless different types of trauma that we as humans can experience, and what constitutes trauma will vary from person to person. However, we are all likely to experience at least one incident in our lives that is traumatic, in a way that it interferes with other facets of our lives due to the residual and sometimes very long-term effects. And our relationship with sex is something that is very, very commonly affected by trauma, due to it being such a vulnerable space. Sexual trauma would generally be defined as an event in which a person experiences non-consensual contact or behaviour, also often referred to as sexual violence or sexual abuse. This may include rape, sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, sexual harassment, military sexual trauma, and can also show up in other ways such as slut-shaming, early exposure to explicit sexual content, non-consensual nude imagery or videos, emotional incest, body shaming, verbal sexual harassment. There is not an exhaustive list or a gatekeep on what is traumatic for a person sexually. So please don't ever feel like because something isn't specifically highlighted or spoken about as sexual trauma, that you aren't validated in what you have experienced and how you feel. This is an extremely complex and nuanced space, and it is really important for people to find the safe space they need to speak freely about their experiences of trauma. As one of the most common causes of trauma is from sexual or domestic violence, I think it's important to note that roughly 35% of women and vulva owners and 25% of men and penis owners have experienced sexual violence, which is a statistic pulled from a study of existing data. But in reality, because so many incidents of sexual assault go unreported, this statistic is sadly probably much higher. Sexual violence and sexual trauma can be detrimental to having a fulfilling sex life. But I think it's really important to emphasize at this point that recovery from trauma-related sexual challenges is absolutely very possible. This is going to feel like an episode that leans towards the negative because we are discussing difficult and harrowing things, but I want everyone to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It will take time and it will take effort, but with the right support and resources, it is possible for us to regain control over our sexual experiences and enjoy fulfilling sexual relationships. Trauma is deeply distressing and disturbing, and it can have a lasting impact on our mental, emotional, and physical health. It can happen to anyone at any age and can really alter our sensuality, sexuality, and ability to experience intimacy in so many ways. And this could be a loss of libido or sexual desire, difficulties with arousal, anxiety, and fear related to sex, shame, and guilt. You may find that you're feeling disconnected from your body, experiencing flashbacks or intrusive thoughts during sexual activity, feeling like you don't have control over your sexual experiences, and even sometimes experiencing physical pain or discomfort during sex. And it is mostly incredibly important to remember that healing takes time, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Just because someone may have taken different steps to you, or you feel like other people with similar experiences have moved past things quicker, it doesn't mean that your own journey is wrong or that you're failing. I really need you to know that and to be really kind to yourself and your path. My experiences, which I will come to in a little bit, are all years and years ago, and they are still an ongoing source of work at times. So please don't ever compare or feel like you have to follow a version of healing that doesn't feel right for you just because it has worked for someone else. Trauma stores itself in our nervous systems. So to create a thriving sex life after trauma, we have to treat our nervous systems to feel fully in our bodies again, because otherwise it can create some very uncomfortable patterns, mostly out of protection and preservation, but this only keeps us from being our true selves and being able to fully embrace all of our ongoing sexual experiences. People mostly attribute trauma, or PTSD, to something that is only dealt with in a mental or emotional capacity, when there are actually quite distinct physiological effects that keep us from feeling safe in our own bodies again. For me, even though I have the contraceptive implant, which means I don't really experience periods, whenever I have been in a place of trauma, I start to bleed very, very regularly, which is not my favorite thing, to be honest, but it's almost like my body is physically rejecting the situation that I'm in. And because I've had previous cancer scares, that has led to me having to have numerous doctor's appointments once again to make sure it isn't related. when actually, as soon as the situation has come to an end, the bleeding pretty much immediately stops. I know I'm someone who compartmentalizes to an unnecessary degree, and I think sometimes my body physically takes on things that my mind just isn't ready to, as a way to say, this is something you need to deal with now. So, yes, that is a little specific to me, but basically, we really have to pay attention to our bodies because it actually has defense mechanisms designed to protect us. For example, it's incredibly common for people to freeze up when getting intimate again after trauma, or even if you find yourself in a situation where you feel any lack of safety. Because when we don't feel safe in our bodies will then find a way to protect and block us from feeling depth in any of our sensations. This can be known as hyperarousal, which means our bodies are telling us we're in danger, even if we aren't. This happens when our nervous systems are emotionally triggered or dysregulated and can happen as a result of certain words, positions, smells, basically anything that makes us jump into fight or flight mode. And it's really important for us to understand exactly why that is happening in order to find ways to move forward from it, because it really interferes with our ability to experience pleasure. And speaking of pleasure, another way trauma can really interfere with our sex lives is by leaving us feeling unworthy of pleasure. It can dangerously affect our confidence and our self-worth in general, let alone our sexual self-worth. And this is largely because, something again I'll get onto with my own experiences also, survivors of sexual trauma often blame themselves, as does society for that matter. And this can create a perpetual cycle of shame and self-doubt, questioning what you did wrong, which, to put it less than eloquently, is just so fucked up for all of us. It has the potential to make us start to think that we are unworthy of love or of pleasure, that our needs or wants or desires don't matter. It can also lead to disassociation, which can happen during sex and intimacy, even when a survivor is in a safe relationship with their romantic partner, because our brain is protecting us from being emotionally or mentally present during any intimate time. It's important for me to say that whilst I'm focusing on sexual specific trauma in this episode, it isn't just sexual trauma that may interfere with your sex life. So please don't feel alienated if you've been affected by a traumatic event that isn't distinctively sexual. Any sort of trauma and traumatic event can affect our mental and physical health and leave us with feelings of disconnection and fear, which can in turn affect our sexual experiences. One of the real key challenges post-trauma is managing the anxiety and fear that can arise during sexual experiences, because this can make it so incredibly difficult to be present and enjoy sexual activity, and can even lead to avoidance of sexual activity altogether if we don't address what's really happening. As I mentioned earlier, it's really common for survivors to experience flashbacks during intimacy and make them feel as if they are re-experiencing their trauma, which feels extremely real and terrifying in the moment, even if they're in a safe space. And it's absolutely 100% understandable that if you are having these experiences, it could feel like you just don't want to engage in any further sexual activity. It can also hugely affect our body image, because it's very natural to blame our own bodies for that abuse. So we end up feeling disconnected from it or even hatred towards it. And this can make sexual intimacy an incredibly intimidating and anxiety-inducing experience. Now, there are a lot of different approaches to working through our trauma-related sexual challenges. My first suggestion would be, if it is something that is available to you, is to work with a therapist who specializes in trauma and has experience helping people work through sexual difficulties. I've been in sex therapy multiple times in my life, and it has changed everything for the better, and is one of the reasons I'm on the path I am. If you find a good fit with the right therapist, they will be able to help you process your trauma and work through any negative beliefs or feelings that may be impacting your sexual experiences. They will be able to help you learn new coping skills when trauma rears its head, help to guide you on how to build trust and safety in future intimate relationships, and how to explore new ways of being sexually intimate. They will also be able to address any underlying trauma symptoms that may be impacting your sexual experiences that we may not even realize are there, which is so often the case. I understand that therapy can be a privilege and isn't something that is an option for everyone, whilst I would absolutely love it to be. So if you can find a way to speak to someone, please do. But if that isn't a possibility, there are other things you can absolutely put in place to help. I usually save the questions for the end of the episode, and the majority will be, but someone has sent me in this question, and it seems very apt for me to drop it in now, as I feel like what I'm about to speak about will help cover the answer. What advice would you give to someone seeking counselling for rape, on a wait list for rape-specific therapy but still waiting, to do on their own to try and start healing? Firstly, I'm so sorry that you've been through what you have, and I want you to know that seeking counselling for rape is a brave and important step towards your healing. I know it can be really frustrating and discouraging to be on a wait list for therapy, but I'm going to try my best to help with some things you can do on your own to start the healing process. This might sound like a bit of a strange one, but continuing to educate yourself on sex and trauma is actually only going to help. Learning about the effects of trauma and feeling well versed on the subject can very strangely actually feel empowering and like you are more aware of yourself and everything that is going on. You really can't go wrong with knowing everything you possibly can about sex and how trauma can affect intimacy. And so it can be really beneficial to look at books and online resources about sex, sexual safety, sexual boundaries, consent, and bodily autonomy. It can also help you to build a vocabulary around your sexual needs so that when the right time comes, you can communicate this effectively to any sexual partners. Explore resources that may provide support, information, or helplines dedicated to sexual assault survivors, because these support organisations can often provide information and guidance on coping strategies and healing techniques, which could also be really helpful. One of the most important things you can do, which might sound a bit more obvious, is really prioritising self-care. Keep doing the things that bring you comfort and pleasure and promote relaxation and emotional well-being, such as spending time with loved ones and engaging in hobbies or activities that you really enjoy. It's also really important to prioritise physical self-care, such as getting enough sleep, something I don't do, eating well, staying active, so that you can feel more in your body again. It isn't for everyone, but journaling can also be a really helpful tool for processing emotions and experiences. Writing about your thoughts and feelings in a safe and private space can help you make sense of your emotions and experiences and gain a greater understanding of your needs and priorities as you continue to move forward. If you feel you can, please do seek support from trusted friends, family members, or support groups. Sharing your experiences with people who are empathetic and understanding can help provide validation and emotional support. One thing that can really help in establishing a feeling of control again is to create structure and routine, as it provides a sense of daily stability. So find a routine that works for you, whatever that means, and try your best if you can to stick to it, because maintaining those routines can really contribute to overall well-being. Set boundaries and don't feel bad about doing so. It's so important to establish and maintain clear boundaries in various aspects of life anyway, but when you are recovering from trauma, it is so significantly imperative. Identify what feels comfortable and safe for you and communicate those boundaries to others. You really have to put yourself first, even if it feels a little jarring and scary. Again, it might not be for you, but if you feel like it might be, consider exploring therapeutic tools and resources available online or through self-help books. These resources may include guided meditation, relaxation exercises, and grounding techniques, which are all ways we can just begin to feel more present, which has for me been the biggest challenge moving out of sexual trauma. Most importantly, practice self-compassion. Be patient and kind to yourself through the healing journey. Acknowledge that healing takes time and that your experiences are valid, and make sure you are speaking to yourself with empathy and understanding. Do continue to pursue the rape-specific therapy because I think it will be invaluable when it becomes available to you. But in the meantime, make sure you give yourself the kindness you absolutely deserve and prioritize your well-being above anything else. I really hope something in there helps, and I'm here for you if you need. I also want to talk about navigating trauma when you're looking at becoming intimate with someone again, for both ourselves and those respective sexual partners. Because partners, you can play a key role in supporting your loved ones. This will include being very patient and very understanding, listening to your partner's needs and boundaries, and avoiding pressure or coercion, which should never be a thing. It's also important for you to educate yourselves about trauma and its impact on sexuality, so that you can be more empathetic and responsive to your partner's needs. That being said, I do believe we have a responsibility to ourselves to look at our trauma and work on it for ourselves. I don't condone people treating partners however they please or in incredibly unhealthy ways and blaming it on trauma. Yes, it can have a massive, massive effect on us. And yes, our partners can be an incredible support system. But if our trauma is causing us to act and project in unhealthy and damaging ways towards our partners, it is time to look inward and try to help ourselves. I don't want that to sound like I have a lack of empathy, because I promise I only say that with love and good intentions. And as someone who has projected past trauma onto a partner and learned myself how important it is to take the time to be honest with myself about that in order to move forward in a healthier way. It probably goes without saying, but communicate with your partner. Open and honest communication is an essential tool for couples to navigate safe and pleasurable intimacy before and after sex. Communicate beforehand to tell your partner where you're at. Communicate during to tell your partner anything that may be going on in your head and body. Communicate after to tell them what did and didn't work. This is often easier said than done, especially for someone who is healing from trauma. So do give yourself the gift of patience. But use these conversations to express your needs and to prioritize comfort and safety in your sexual experiences. This can involve setting clear boundaries, explaining your triggers, discussing turn-ons and turn-offs, talking about what kind of touch is okay, and basically just taking things slow and focusing on building trust and intimacy before engaging in sexual activities. Also, make sure you debrief after sex to ensure everyone is feeling safe, regulated, and on the same page. We know how obsessed I am with aftercare, and that applies here more than ever. No matter how well we know our partners, we can't read each other's minds. It's truly up to all members of a relationship to be honest and forthcoming about sexual needs. Again, if it is something that is available to you, it might help to work with a relationship therapist if you are struggling with this, as they can help navigate any communication barriers that you come up against. Mindfulness can be monumentally helpful in managing anxiety and fear related to sex after trauma, especially when you're looking at experiencing intimacy again. This involves being present in the moment and accepting your thoughts and feelings without judgment. It can really help you to stay grounded in your body and be more present during your sexual experiences. You can try this with different techniques, such as deep breathing or visualization, or even progressive muscle relaxation, which involves tensing and releasing different muscle groups in the body, which is going to help reduce anxiety and promote relaxation. And before you become intimate with another person, especially if you are feeling disconnected from your own body, start to practice self-pleasure. Masturbation is a really powerful tool to get back in touch with your sexual self in a safe space. You can start to reawaken parts of you that feel frozen or disconnected. There's no rush, there's no destination, so you can even use this as its own mindfulness practice and think of it as a meditation to feel pleasure and connection with your body again. Remind yourself that you are worthy and deserving of pleasure. Remind yourself of how good things can feel when you are safe and comfortable. And also, it's not something you need to do out of obligation or to achieve something. Use it as a tool for relaxation and feeling embodied, and as a way to feel empowered when you feel comfortable introducing intimacy with a partner or partners again. And even when that time comes, exploring different types of sexual experiences can be helpful in reclaiming your sexuality. This might mean engaging in sexual activities that don't involve intercourse, plenty of which can be found in my previous episode, which is all about outer course and some of those options. But sensual touch or non-penetrative sex can be especially helpful in feeling more comfortable and in control during sexual experiences before you feel ready to move into intercourse or penetration again, if that's something you ever want to do anyway, depending on what your sexual lifestyle involves. Intimacy is about connection and pleasure. As I said last time, people get stuck in a mindset that sex needs to happen a certain way or take a certain amount of time, whether that's positions or routines or even location. The goal of intimacy isn't perfection. It's prioritizing each other's pleasure. And that might look a little different for a trauma survivor. If there are times when a survivor feels triggered and needs to stop, that's okay. If sex doesn't end with an orgasm, that's okay. Focus on pleasure, safety, and being present and connected, because there's no perfect way to get intimate, and navigating it at all after trauma is a challenge. So sex is probably going to look a little different for a while. And that is okay. However, if sex is continuing to leave you in physical pain or discomfort, please do seek medical help to try and address it. Trauma can leave women and vulva owners with conditions such as vaginismus, as extensively discussed with my best friend Katie in season 1, and men and penis owners can experience erectile dysfunction after the fact. So please do look at different treatment options that may be available to you if you are experiencing physical differences that are affecting you sexually. It's normal to experience the entire roller coaster of emotions related to sex after trauma, including fear, anxiety, shame, and guilt. Remember that healing takes time, and there is no one perfect approach. It's not a race or something that should be just gotten over with. Prioritize your own comfort and safety in sexual experiences. Communicate openly and honestly with your partners about your needs and boundaries. Seek support where you can. Explore different types of sexual experiences. Practice mindfulness. And do seek medical help if needed. Again, I really want to reiterate that I know it's heavy, but you can reclaim your sexual self and have a fulfilling sex life after trauma. I promise. Okay, I'm now going to speak on my personal experiences of trauma that have affected my sexual journey quite dramatically, which, even though I am always an open and honest person and want to be able to use my experiences to help others, this still feels a little intimidating. About 1.5 years ago, a young girl came up publicly about sexual abuse that she was experiencing with her partner, who was widely known in the sports world. And the reaction was quite honestly shocking, even though she had video and audio evidence. And it prompted me to be open on social media about the experiences I've had that have been quite monumental in my life, because it just highlighted to me how quickly and aggressively people are shut down when we speak openly about things like this. And I wanted to start at least trying to create a space that felt safe for other people to be open, or just to know that they aren't alone. Some people will have seen this post already, so I apologize in advance for having to hear it out loud. But for me, it feels like the best way to sum up the 3 experiences that have affected my sex life the most. And for my own peace, it feels a little easier for me to reread something I've already previously written than to try and find new words by revisiting it all in my head. So I hope that's okay. Here we go. When I was 17 years old, I was raped in a bathroom at a house party. I wasn't new to sex, and people considered me to be a sexually confident person. It was someone I believed myself to be attracted to, but yet when it came down to it, something felt very, very wrong, and I didn't want to go through with it. I voiced that. It wasn't well received, and how I felt, what I wanted, was deemed irrelevant, as he had made the decision that it was happening regardless. Afterwards, I told 2 friends. They asked if he was just drunk, if I had led him on, or if he just had the wrong idea. I don't blame them. It's what we've been taught. He didn't have the wrong idea. I had been very clear. As people know, I'm fairly direct. But it was enough to make me feel like it was my fault and shamed into not wanting to speak to anyone else about it. So I blamed myself and shut up, and that was that. The second time was a one-off incident in a long-term relationship. We were apart a lot of the time because I was away on tour, and the distance was causing a lack of security, resulting in behaviour that occurred from a place of jealousy and control. One night we had been out together, and I was truly what you would call blackout drunk. I came home and quite literally passed out. Whilst I was unconscious, said partner decided that having sex with me and filming it was a way to prove to me that I could not be trusted to go out and get drunk when he wasn't around. The fucked up thing was I believed it, when actually the one not to be trusted was clearly him. He couldn't be trusted not to go to those lengths to prove a point born out of a place of control. I told a few people. A couple of them were angry and told me to leave immediately. These were my female identifying friends. The other two seemed to think it was a bit of a shitty thing to do, but not that it was entirely problematic because we were in a relationship. These were my male identifying friends. I don't blame them. It's what we've been taught. I still have that video, but I blamed myself and shut up, and that was that. The third was that of a long-term sexually and emotionally abusive relationship that spanned a matter of years. Sexually abusive relationships are one of the biggest head fucks in the entire world. They are scary because there's a part of you that still feels like it's your duty or that something is wrong with you, or at least that's how you are made to feel. I think that a healthy sex life in a relationship is very important. In fact, I feel incredibly passionate about it, and I'm literally studying to be a sex therapist for this very reason. But sexual intimacy within healthy, loving relationships is always consensual. There came a point in that relationship where I no longer felt attracted to this person who was abusive. That didn't matter to him. I was in too deep and too scared to leave. And so we had sex. All the time. It was often very violent and very forceful and very painful. And it was masqueraded as passionate. I still have physical scars from some of the events that took place. I stopped thinking of my body as my own and accepted it for what it was. When you truly believe you love someone and they use fear, shame, guilt, threats, manipulation, or intimidation to force you to have sex, you have no idea where your head is at. I wanted to want to, and I wanted to feel differently. I was forced to have sex when I was ill. I don't mean a slight cold. I mean in amongst a long and ongoing cancer scare, during which I had been medically advised not to have sex. He didn't care, even at the times I said I was really in too much pain. I didn't leave. People now say I can't imagine you putting up with that. But you just don't know unless you're in it. Sex in that relationship became a tool to exhibit power and control. And boy, did it. And every day I took it, and I didn't leave. I blamed myself, and I shut up, and I got on with it. My family and friends believed that partner to be charming and wonderful and lovely towards me. That was the image that was given in public. It was hard for them to believe that it could actually be as bad as I was saying it was when I finally had the guts to talk about it. Apart from one friend, I never thought I would cry on this podcast. Apart from one friend, my best friend, Zoe Arshamian, whose zero tolerance attitude was my first step towards getting out of that relationship. But it took one person to believe me without doubt or question. Because how could someone who appeared to love me so much truly be so horrible behind closed doors? I had screenshots, but I wasn't as smart as I should have been in those moments. I didn't take audios or videos. I don't think I would have dared. I got out of the relationship eventually, But I know that if I told people who know that person now, they would still question me and they would still doubt me. This is happening to your friends, your sisters, your colleagues, your neighbours. Being a sexual person doesn't mean you are deserving of rape or sexual abuse. People, but women especially, have been silenced forever. They've been made to feel that it's their fault. So they blame themselves, they shut up, and that's that. And when they don't, they are met with kickback, with abuse, with questions. And so they believe they should stay silent. I know I did. So that was the post. I have to be honest, there have been other instances in my life that could also be contributed, and times when things have been extremely muddy, but these are the ones that held the most impact. I did not bother to take time to deal with the first two experiences. Whether that was age or inexperience, I don't know. But my coping mechanism was to just have frivolous, careless sex with just about anyone, and not in the promiscuous and fun way that I promote nowadays. Yes, I had a good time sometimes, but really it was unhealthy and destructive. So if anyone is listening and finding themselves in a similar position, I'm begging you to take a pause and give yourself a break. For me, it felt like some kind of revenge, but I couldn't even tell you who for. It was a form of escapism, almost like if I built up so many further sexual experiences that those ones would be so far in the past, I could just forget them and pretend they never happened. But that's not a thing, and it doesn't work. And the second experience left me feeling nervous, being drunk around boyfriends for a long time. But I didn't put in any work to try and heal from those traumas until the time came for me to deal with the third one. And then it all came crashing down when I had to revisit all of it. When it came to getting out of the abusive relationship, my extremely naive idea was that when the relationship ended, everything would be okay. But actually, the effects of sexual, physical, emotional abuse can be long-lasting, and they certainly were for me. No one tells you how long, and how could they? There isn't an answer for that. But I know that the expectation was instant relief when I managed to escape, or a sense of exhilarating freedom, or even just a calming peace. But what I actually got was completely different. Instead of tranquility, I felt anxiety and guilt. And sometimes, possibly the most jarring, I felt nothing at all. What I learned and what I continue to learn is my recovery may not ever mean complete freedom from the effects and memories of those traumas. As I've said, this is an incredibly individual experience that will look different for everyone. But for me, it has been a learning curve to simply have the ability to be and live in the present without being overwhelmed and consumed by thoughts, feelings, and memories of that past. As a person in all aspects of my life, actually, my go-to has always been to get on with it, tell everyone I'm fine, and live in survival mode. There's a desire, and what feels like a pressure, actually, to just get over it. So people can feel like their process is taking too long, or they aren't doing it right. So some will find revisiting traumatic memories destructive to their well-being. Others will find it beneficial to retell their experiences. It was actually COVID and the lockdowns that granted me the time to confront these experiences in a new way and look at the complexities behind all of them, and also to realise that this is something I want to study and work in. I had gone to sex therapy after my abusive relationship because of the effects it had left on me sexually, which were actually really fucked up. When I moved into my next relationship and had what can only be considered a safe and indeed very consensual sex life, I was fully convinced that my partner wasn't even into me because they weren't essentially beating me up during sex. Because even though the abusive sex was awful, it had been shrouded in claims of passion and desire. And I had obviously over time, without even realizing, completely bought into that. And it made me feel sexually cold to my new respective partner and also unattractive, even though this was a partner who was sexually loving and attentive. And I had to realize this wasn't right and it was time to get outside help because it had gone beyond something I could compute and work through myself. That therapy was monumental and changed everything for me because it did make me look at all of the sexual traumas in my past. When you're forced to hold a mirror up to a past like that, it can feel like your whole world implodes a bit because where do you even begin? Well, you take it very slowly and work through it bit by bit. It took me almost 2 years in therapy to feel like my sexual self again and be present in my experiences. Today has made me a little emotional because I'm speaking publicly and I guess just hoping it helps someone. But also, I'm really tired. But as a general, I do feel emotionally disassociated from those experiences now and can usually speak on them in a very matter-of-fact way without feeling too affected. But it took time. And there are still ways in which I'm affected sexually and I'm still working on them. But they are a matter of trust and that can take a long, long time to rebuild. There are sexual practices that I used to love that I don't like to engage in anymore because their ex-partner abused them and pushed them to a point of violence that was scary and too uncomfortable to enjoy. I've been open on previous episodes that even though once upon a time I enjoyed wax play, I can't let candles near me during sex because I still have scars on my back from times that partner would throw full candles of wax over me without telling me and just fully burn me. Another thing I'm super cagey about is sending nudes or videos because videos of me ended up on a porn site after that breakup and it was a lot of work to get them removed. And so it's really difficult for me to trust people with that kind of intel anymore. And I guess this is a little light relief for this episode. All of my friends know this about me already. And the Googled nudes, which is basically the fact that for the longest time, if someone asked me for a nude, I would find a stock photo similar to me on Google and just send that, which is really fucking stupid. And I should have just said, no, I don't want to send a nude. Thanks and good night. But listen, we're all learning, including me. But yes, I have put a lot of work in to move forward from my sexual trauma. But one of the reasons it is incredibly difficult is the first year of that relationship, we had an incredible sex life. It was explorative, it was communicative, and it was passionate in the healthy way that a sexual connection is. And then it all went so very wrong. That will never not be a scary thing to me. And it means it's difficult for me to trust in what feels like even the safest sexual connections. But all I can do is try and treat each new partner with fresh energy, try to stay present and hope for the best. But it's hard. And I know some parts of me will never be the same again. And I say that as someone who does absolutely feel reclaimed sexually. I've been living a very pleasurable and fun sex life for a long time now, but it didn't come without work. I'm very open about these experiences with partners. It's important to me that they know my sexual background and why certain things might be a problem for me. But again, it all took time. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to find what works for you. This is just my story. To all of you still going, be gentle, patient, compassionate, and kind to yourself as you move through your processes until you have restored your sense of safety, control, and security. I am years past these experiences, and as you now know, I still work to move forward from them. I'm going to move into some of your questions and experiences that you've sent me this week. And I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability and trust in doing so. It means a lot to me that you feel you can be open with me about these things. And I'm so sorry that so many of us are dealing with trauma. I know I'm giving it wide-eyed naivete to even say this, but I truly hope that one day this won't be something we all have to deal with, and we can learn sex in a healthy and happy way and all have a fucking better time of it. Okay. Question number 1. Where do you think the line of coercion is when it comes to sex within a relationship? There have been times when he's been super keen to have sex and I wasn't in the mood, but eventually I decided and consented to do it. And I was just wondering what you thought about this messy grey area. Oh, yes, it is grey. I agree. Listen, the issue of coercion in sexual relationships can seem complex and nuanced, but essentially, coercion in any form is not acceptable, and it will in time have a significant impact on your well-being and sense of autonomy. It's important to remember that consent is not just about saying yes or no to sex, but also about feeling comfortable and safe in those sexual experiences. If someone feels pressured or obligated to engage in sexual activity, even if they eventually consent, that can be a sign of coercion, and it can actually have negative impacts on emotional and mental well-being. In your personal situation, it's important to consider whether you felt comfortable and safe in the sexual experience. If you felt pressured, even if you eventually consented, this might be something worth discussing with your partner. Open communication is key in any relationship, especially when it comes to your sexual relationship. So it's important to talk to your partner about your boundaries and expectations around sex, and to be clear about what you are and aren't comfortable with. It's also important for your partner to listen and respect your boundaries, and to prioritize your comfort and safety in any sexual experience, and vice versa. Realistically, we are all going to find ourselves in situations where one partner is in the mood and the other isn't. And this is one of the reasons I advocate for masturbation so much. I know it's not exactly the same, especially if you want to get it on with your partner. But if you can be comfortable with enjoying self-pleasure, then this is an option that is always readily available to you if your partner isn't quite where you are. And we need to be promoting this as a healthy practice in long-term relationships. If your partner doesn't want to have sex, leave it be. Also, how much pleasure are you really getting from someone who isn't totally into having sex with you in that moment? I get it's muddy because sometimes we consent and then we actually get into it and we enjoy it, but there's still the knowledge that we weren't really on board. And is that really okay? I think make the time for a sexual check-in and sensitively broach this subject with your partner. Also because you may find yourself in a situation where the shoe is on the other foot, and then you will have had a discussion and you will both know where you stand on the matter when one of you is in the mood and the other is not. It's just a healthier way to move forward on something that is incredibly common for most long-term relationships. It's a regular occurrence for libidos to be up and down and not always in sync. It's mostly just important to always take the steps to ensure that you feel safe and respected in any sexual experience, and I think beginning that communication will definitely help that. This is terrible, but I often find a lot of my female friends who have been sexually assaulted find it really difficult to support the trans community, as they very much see men as people from a violent group who rape. Do you have any advice on how to gently unpack this and help them separate? Oof, a tough question indeed, actually. Okay, so I think it's understandable that survivors of sexual assault may have concerns or negative perceptions of men due to those experiences. However, it's so deeply and truly important to recognize that trans women are not the same as cisgender men and should and cannot be viewed as a monolithic group. Trans women face so many unique challenges and experiences that are completely different from cisgender men. There are sadly bad people out there. Those bad people may be cisgender, they may be non-binary, they may be trans, but we cannot label entire groups of people as violent or rapists. It's just not feasible or fair. The group of people who are rapists are rapists. That group isn't all cisgender men or all trans women. I think one way to approach this topic with your friends is to emphasize the importance of intersectionality and recognize the complexity of identity and experiences. As individuals, we all hold multiple identities and experiences that intersect and influence one another. And those identities and experiences are going to be completely different as a cisgender man or a trans woman. So that's a way to start seeing a separation between the two gender identities. I think it would also be helpful to provide resources or information about the experiences of trans women and the challenges they face, as well as the ways in which transphobia intersects with other forms of discrimination and oppression. Education is the source of pretty much everything, because if we were all educated on trans issues from the off, we'd all be in a much better place already. So by educating themselves on these issues, your friends may be better equipped to understand and support the trans community. It would also, in my opinion, be good to encourage your friends to connect with trans individuals and learn from their experiences. By building relationships and engaging in open dialogue, they may gain a better understanding of the unique challenges faced by trans individuals and be better able to support them. I do have a trans woman joining me as a guest on the podcast relatively soon, so I can only hope that maybe they can tune into that conversation with an open mind and start to think about seeing things a little differently. As with all conversations to do with trauma and rape, it's important to approach these conversations with your friends with sensitivity and empathy, because we have to recognize that everyone's experiences are valid. However, if you can please encourage your friends to be open-minded and willing to learn and to prioritize empathy and understanding in their interactions with others. The trans community have an exceptionally difficult time just trying to exist in a world that seems set against letting that happen. So I would like to think we can start to be more accepting and there for each other. Do you believe there are inherently safe or unsafe people, generally male, when it comes to sex, or that anyone can be unsafe or threatening in the right circumstances? Oh, another tough question to answer. And it's very important to me to approach this question with nuance, because I hate a blanket statement anyway, but I don't think it's accurate or fair to make blanket statements about entire genders or assume that certain individuals are inherently safe or unsafe based on their gender. I think one of the scary things is that really anyone can engage in unsafe or threatening behavior, regardless of their gender or identity. But the difference is, most of us won't. There isn't one inherent trait that makes someone safe or unsafe when it comes to sex. And it's really important to focus on individual behavior and actions rather than making assumptions based on gender or identity. And I hate to bring it back to society because I feel like it's all I do, but it's impossible to ignore the role of societal norms and power dynamics in shaping people's sexual behavior and experiences. When I say that, I mean, for example, men may be socialized, wrongly so, of course, to believe that they are entitled to sex and to assert dominance in sexual situations, which can, in the wrong hands or wrong mindset, contribute to unsafe or threatening behavior. However, I hate to use this phrase, it's important to recognize that this is not true for all men. Hashtag not all men. Because at the end of the day, we all have agency to make our own choices and decisions. We are all responsible for our own choices and actions, and it's essential to hold people accountable for any harmful or abusive behavior they exhibit, which happens shockingly less than it should. Honestly, what we need is a society that fosters a culture that promotes consent, respect, and open communication in all relationships, regardless of gender, regardless of identity. We need to be promoting education and awareness around healthy relationships, and respect is crucial in fostering an environment where we can all engage in safe and consensual sexual experiences. We need to be recognizing the importance of enthusiastic and ongoing consent, respecting boundaries, and actively engaging in conversations about consent and sexual ethics. I've completely digressed, but basically, I think we need to focus on individual behavior and actions rather than making any generalizations about a gender. I also want to encourage people to trust their instincts and, again, prioritize your safety and well-being, because regardless of gender identity, if you ever feel uncomfortable, unsafe, or threatened in any situation, please try to take steps to protect yourself and seek support. That's really the most important thing here. But honestly, a very interesting question, and although these are sort of my initial thoughts on the matter, but this is one I'm going to continue to think about, so I might end up coming back with a bit of a follow-up because this has given me food for thought and research, actually. I was in a relationship where my partner just wouldn't take no for an answer. Whenever he wanted it, he took it, and it didn't matter how I felt about it. It took me 10 years to trust a man enough again to let them go near me. It took me even longer to let myself go near me again. As I'm sure you've already heard from my own personal experiences, I hear you, and I've got you. I'm so sorry to hear that you had to go through such a traumatic experience in your past relationship. And because I've been there, it hurts me to think about it, because I just truly hate that people go through this. I hate knowing how much it hurt me and knowing how many other people are going through similar things. It is never okay for someone to ignore your boundaries or force you to do something that you're not comfortable with. And I really cannot adequately express how much I empathize with the pain and distress that you've experienced. We both know that healing from sexual trauma is a process, and it can take time and it takes patience. And it's also really, really common for survivors to struggle with trust and intimacy issues after experiencing sexual violence or coercion. So you are sadly far from alone in this experience. It's essential that you are prioritizing your well-being and taking steps to rebuild that trust and regain control over your body and sexual experiences. Hopefully, some of the things mentioned already in this episode might be helpful, but this may involve seeking professional therapy, engaging in self-care activities, and exploring healthy coping mechanisms. Please surround yourself with supportive people who respect your boundaries and who provide validation and emotional support. And avoid individuals who minimize or dismiss your experiences because, unfortunately, and honestly, unbelievably, those people exist. Your healing is your journey, and it's okay to take things at your own pace. Even though we've experienced similar relationships, the intricacies of them will always be so different. And I hope that things are starting to feel a little better for you. Continue to be kind and patient with yourself and prioritize your safety above all else. It is possible to heal and regain control over your body and sexuality. And even though that will happen in a different way for you than it did for me, I really do have every faith that a safer sexual relationship is in your future. And if you need anything else along the way, you know where I am. I spent my entire early sexuality seeking acceptance. I always felt shit after having sex, and I also never really enjoyed it until my 20s. That assurance gave me a really bad relationship with what sex is and could never really fully give myself or orgasm at times. I hate to hear that you struggled with seeking acceptance, and I'm so sorry to hear that. It is such a crappy feeling to have sex and then feel shit after it. And I know I've definitely been there, so I'm really sorry. It's sadly so common for people to feel pressure to conform to societal expectations around sex and relationships. And honestly, all it does is result in feelings of shame, guilt, and confusion, which is everything I don't want for people. I, as usual, blame our shitty sex education, well, complete lack of it, because we just aren't adequately prepared for how huge a part of our life and identity sex becomes. But listen, everyone's journey with sexuality is unique, and there is no right or wrong way to experience sexual pleasure or desire. At this point, I just want to try to make sure that your experiences with sex from here on out are significantly more positive. So please remember, it's okay to take things at your own pace and prioritize your own needs and desires. Take time to engage in activities that promote positive body image and self-esteem. And also, as I mentioned earlier, take some time for self-pleasure, because the more connected with your body you feel, the more comfortable and enjoyable sex will be for you. And hopefully, if you're able to experience orgasm with yourself, it will make it more likely with a partner. And also the mindfulness practices, as mentioned earlier, will always help with feeling present and the feeling of being able to fully give yourself. If you continue struggling with negative feelings around sex and difficulty experiencing pleasure or orgasm and feel like it isn't improving, and this is something that's available to you, there are therapists who specialize in sexuality and intimacy issues, and they are there to provide safe and non-judgmental spaces to explore your feelings, help develop healthy coping strategies, and work towards establishing a positive relationship with your sexuality. One thing I hate is people seem to often think that it's too late to reclaim their own bodies or their sexuality. But I promise, It's never too late to work towards developing a healthy and fulfilling relationship with your sexuality. You deserve it. And I truly, truly want you to have that. So please know I'm sending you so much love, and I hope that things are starting to be better now. I have had huge sexual trauma in the past, and I find myself putting off sex with new partners until either I feel okay to talk about it or they get fed up and don't want to wait anymore. Either way, I find it a really difficult thing to broach. Again, I'm sorry to hear that you've experienced sexual trauma and are struggling with talking about it with new partners. This is very common, and I can only hope that something in this episode has helped even a tiny bit. It's completely understandable to feel hesitant and uncertain about disclosing such sensitive information, as it is such a vulnerable and emotional process. One thing that may be helpful is to establish trust and emotional intimacy with a partner before discussing your trauma. But I understand that this also feels scary because we all worry that whenever we do disclose any of our trauma, that it might be off-putting to someone. Although, if that ever were to be the case, I'd consider that to be a huge red flag and encourage you to get out ASAP. But if you can find some emotional intimacy with the partner first, this can and should help create a safe and supportive space for you to share your experiences and feelings if your partner is a decent and kind person. Also, please practice self-compassion and remind yourself that your healing and well-being are the most important priorities. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you may be hesitant or taking your time with sexual intimacy. When you do feel ready to talk to your partner about your trauma, approach the conversation with honesty and clarity. That might feel scary, but you will feel so much better for it, I promise. You may find it helpful to plan out what you want to say ahead of time. You may even want to write it out and literally read it off a page, and that is okay. You do whatever you need to do to make that as comfortable for yourself as possible. You also have the right to establish and communicate your boundaries and needs in any sexual situation. As partners, we should be respecting those boundaries, prioritizing each other's well-being and comfort. Any other environment certainly isn't going to promote relaxation or pleasure. If you find that talking about your trauma is still difficult, again, please do, if you can, consider seeking support from a therapist who can provide guidance and support in navigating these conversations and healing from past trauma. Please keep reminding yourself that healing from sexual trauma is a journey. It's okay to take things at your own pace. You are not alone in this experience, and there is support and resources available to you. And I'm one of them if you need. Having a very traumatic pregnancy and birth has been so difficult for my wife and my sex life. I know I'm starting every answer pretty much the same, but I am, again, truly sorry to hear that your wife has had a traumatic pregnancy and birth and that it has affected your sex life. I'm sure that it was just a typo, but I will say that at a difficult time, language can be so very important. So when you say my sex life, I would like to encourage that if you speak to your wife about this, that you refer to it as our sex life. You may already do that, but because I saw it written down, I just felt compelled to say that just in case. It's just so important to remember that you are a team and you're in this together. It's also not uncommon at all for traumatic birth experiences to have an impact on sexual intimacy and desire, and this will actually be explored much deeper in a separate episode, which is more specifically on this topic. But for now, I will say it's imperative to approach the situation with sensitivity, empathy, and patience. Your wife is going to need time and space to process her trauma and to heal emotionally before feeling comfortable with sexual intimacy again. And definitely look at exploring intimacy in other ways together before progressing sexually if she doesn't feel ready. It's, of course, incredibly important to prioritize her emotional and physical well-being after this traumatic pregnancy and birth, but also you must find the space to communicate openly and honestly about your feelings and needs as well. There are two of you in this relationship, and it's important that you hear each other and find a way to help one another as best you can. And it will be helpful to establish some boundaries, some expectations around your sexual intimacy. It's going to sound like I'm on repeat again, but if you can, it would be helpful to seek support from a therapist who specializes in working with couples who have experienced traumatic events. They'll be able to provide you with some guidance, some support in navigating the emotional challenges of recovery and rebuilding intimacy. And they'll also be able to offer practical strategies for coping with these sexual difficulties. Remember to prioritize some self-care and engage in activities together that promote your emotional and physical well-being. And make sure to spend quality time together in those non-sexual ways. This is going to be a journey that you need to take walking side by side, remembering you are teammates. And even though it may take time and effort to rebuild sexual intimacy and trust, with patience, empathy, and support, it is truly possible to move towards healing and a positive relationship with sexual intimacy for the two of you. I'm sending love to both your wife and yourself, and I truly hope you find a way forward that works for you both. No question, just sending massive love and virtual hugs. My partner has a fuckload of sexual trauma as well as other trauma, and it sucks and is such a minefield to navigate, but patience and communication are key, and understanding no and stop are vital. I've discovered I have phenomenal breaks. Thank you for the love and the virtual hugs. It's very much appreciated. And I'm really happy that it sounds like you are taking a compassionate and supportive approach to your partner's trauma, which is amazing and honestly really essential in helping them feel safe and comfortable in sexual situations. Obviously, I'm completely on board, and you are absolutely right that communication and understanding boundaries are crucial components of navigating sexual intimacy with a partner who has experienced trauma. It's so important to be patient and understanding as any partner works through their trauma. And even though it can be so painful to watch a partner go through something like that, their healing is its own process that will take the time it does. Again, if it's something that's available for you and your partner is open to it, encouraging your partner to seek some support from a therapist could be helpful in facilitating healing and building further sexual intimacy for the two of you. It's also really great that you recognize your own ability to use breaks, and I, as an outsider, appreciate that prioritizing your partner's comfort and safety in your sexual experiences together. Because being attentive to non-verbal cues, checking in frequently, and being open to feedback is always going to ensure that both of you feel heard and respected. Navigating trauma is tough. There's no two ways about it. But if you can continue to prioritize open communication, empathy, and patience, this is only going to support the two of you building a healthy and positive sexual relationship. And I'm really wishing the both of you the very, very best. Thank you so much to everyone who has stuck with me for today's episode. It has been a topic I've wanted to open the discussion on since I started Sex on the Peach. And even though I find it incredibly easy to speak to people about, It's one that has taken me a little while to put together publicly because it was so important to me to put it together sensitively and in a way that felt right. To anyone who is listening and in trauma recovery, please keep on going, one day at a time, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time if necessary. But I promise you all, you've got this, even if it doesn't feel like it. And also, I've got you. I want to end today's episode with some words from an author I love called Bo Taplin, because they helped me at times. And I hope they help you too on the days when you just need a little reminder of how strong you are, even when it doesn't feel like it. You are fierce. You're a survivor. You're a fighter through and through. Little brave, breathe. There is a warrior within you. I'll see you soon for another episode of Sex on the Peach. But for today, thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love, Peach.